being washed through it, and they diverted rivers. It's rivers that were coming from Lake Titicaca. And in fact, when I was here, they had a sign here not to take photos of this for some reason. They didn't want people to know about these strange tunnels here. I don't know why. In this same area is the famous underground temple, they call it. It has all these faces that are around it. And it has this statue here, which is the famous Kon-Tiki statue. The Norwegian archaeologist Thor Heyerdahl made this famous, actually. They called him Kon-Tiki. He has a big mustache and a beard. And American Indians do not have facial hair. They cannot grow a mustache. They cannot grow a beard. They don't shave at all. So American Indians do not have beards or mustaches. He is also holding his hands in what's called the famous tiki position. One hand over your heart and one hand over your stomach. And this is, if you go to Tahiti and New Zealand, you will get little tiki pendants in greenstone or something. They're going to have that exact same position. That's the tiki position. Hand over your heart and hand over your stomach. So here we have really a connection to Pacific Island. Also here at Tiwanaku is this pyramid, the Akapana pyramid. It's largely destroyed now. The Spanish dug it up and left some treasure here. And what was there was an Andean cross, a Swiss cross, and it was a pool at the very top. And somehow it was just like a reservoir for the water that they forced through passageways in Tiwanaku, in my mind probably to wash the ores, to get all the metals and stuff. And just to have a lake.
Attention to the designated grid square.
They would have had to pump water uphill using some kind of a ram pump or something, forcing water uphill to this river.
Attention to the map.
Was pre-planned. It's a perfectly made site, although it's utterly destroyed. You know, we'll see more of that too. There we go. Here's where Lake Titicaca is. South America causes here. Tiwanaku's right in this area. The famous Nazca Plain down here in the desert, right here. Lima, the capital up here. And this is what Lake Titicaca looks like in the satellite photo. Lake Titicaca is divided into two big lakes, what they call the Greater Lake. And parts of Titicaca are very, very deep. This part over here is extremely deep, about 1,000 feet deep. And notice the lesser lake over here. It's shallower. Tiwanaku's like right down here. This area of the lake is famous. I've been told by my Bolivian guides and other people that this is an area also of UFO activity, and that there's underwater ruins in that part of the lake, and I believe there's other cities. So here's another map, smaller lake. About half of Lake Titicaca is in Peru, the other half in Bolivia. And here's this area with the sunken city, a lot of UFO activity. Also on Lake Titicaca are the famous reed boats that they're making. Thor Heyerdahl went here to get his reed boat makers to do his trans-Pacific and transatlantic voyages. These kind of reed boats are also made in Morocco and Egypt and Iran, also on Easter Island. Reed boats like this are unsinkable. They have a shallow draft that can go over coral reefs very easily, and even if the boat breaks up, it won't sink in all parts of it. Ramiro Gonzalez, a Bolivian artist, look I got when I was in Bolivia one time, and he was fascinated with Tiwanaku, and I liked his art, so I put it in my presentation. He imagined Tiwanaku too as being this big watery canal city with water flowing all through it, and there are canals around there. Maybe people aren't noticed a bit, but there are all these canals, but they don't look exactly what they were for. This was his vision of sort of what it would have looked like, all this artificial canals and waters and lakes, rivers, part of Tiwanaku, that boated around it. Like Churchward, he envisioned South America as a kind of long,
returning to the airfield
continent that was more down near the ocean, something like New Zealand or Norway, some fjords, stuff like that. There could pole shift About a kilometer or so, just to the north of the main ruins of Tiwanaku, is Pumapunku. Pumapunku has some of the most interesting ruins. My wife Jennifer walked around these giant slabs of sandstone and granite. Combination of sandstone and granite. Massive slabs weighing hundreds of tons, tossed around like some little kids' blocks. And what you see there too are these keystone cuts. Start to see more of these keystone cuts, and these are huge ones too. These are in giant slabs of sandstone. Molten metals would be poured into this. There would have been huge metallic plants, bronze or something like that. You know, we saw that earlier at Ollantaytambo, but Ollantaytambo, of course, the mainstream, that's still living. But Tiwanaku is absolutely free. Inca mainstream as it is now, and it's many, many thousands of years old. So this is really indication of what is attributed to the Incas. Incas didn't build any of that stuff, and it's pre-Inca.
We're ahead of the enemy. Follow me.
You might see today when you go to Pumapunku, giant slabs standing around, pieces of building blocks, the whole place has been destroyed. This is actually in front, this is a big granite slab, sandstone slab. These are some of these H blocks and other megaliths that are finally cut before most of this. You have blocks of stone like this, perfectly cut, trapezoid type markings, and really complicated articulation right here. But somebody with apparently good power cutting this, and it's really a form of decoration. Although mainstream archaeologists are saying, again, oh yeah, they're just here with a back higher than these stones, and just making some kind of chisel too, of course, to do this.
Returning to the base.
But all of this kind of just excessive decoration that's completely unnecessary and would appear to be very difficult to do. More shots, what it looks like around Pumapunku. Again, more of these giant stone cuts. You wouldn't think that giant slabs would need this at all, but more of these stone cuts, circular. Here we are, Ancient Aliens show. We're filming one of the episodes.
Back up.
Famous H blocks that are kind of like Lego blocks, more keystone cuts, typical of what's there. The keystone cuts are never the plans. They're never really seen. They're always other blocks on top of this. So you dismantle these blocks to see these things. This is a friend of mine, a British engineer, who now lives in the United States. His name is Chris Dunn. A friend of mine, and he's very much an engineer, runs a machine shop in Illinois. And he's now using his special tours
Heading to the base.
to look at
Leading for
a block
landing.
of granite that has saw marks perfectly cut. He's examining it here, and what we're really looking at is special saw marks right there. So these saw marks are really over here. Somebody with a power saw has gone there and cut it along, and then it's drilled. A small little drill hole made in. And all has to really be done with a power tool. That's what he is really examining carefully. See, yeah, I mean, it could really be done with just simple and things like that. According to him, you need to have power. This is typical trenching that archaeologists do. They go out and they just find inherited things to them. They continue to trench something underneath. And what they're finding out here is, cut stone blocks, and again, these keystone cuts. Keystone cuts are all over the place there, and in Tiwanaku too. And this is the back part of Pumapunku. They don't let you go here anymore. And what you see here is these blocks of granite that are lying here on these pillars of mud and muck. And what seems to be evident here is that some massive tidal wave, cataclysm, just hit Pumapunku and Tiwanaku, wiped it out, buried it in tons of mud and muck. Probably some kind of tidal wave flood coming from Lake Titicaca, destroyed the buildings, and even today, these blocks of stone are just sitting here on the mud and muck from that cataclysmic destruction. Back in Tiwanaku, which is about a kilometer away, this is part of a monolithic door. You see how it's all cut. And then this area here was some kind of flaw, or it had been chipped and stuff, and it's some kind of like super concrete that the ancients had poured in here to fill in this chipped part of this block of stone that's standing up. And this is also right in the same vicinity. This is part of some kind of ancient doorway or wall. And what's curious here is that it's how it's perfectly curved along this section. Like it's been cut with a lathe or something that's cutting the granite block. And as Christopher Dunn would explain to me, who runs these machine shops and does all this stuff all the time, like this side of the block is perfectly straight, perfectly smooth granite, and so is this part. But what is difficult, he says, is to bring two surfaces together. One, a curved surface here, and then this one, a flat surface. And just bashing something out with a rock in your hand, or even just like a bronze chisel, you can't really do this. This is something that has to be done with literally computer-controlled power tools that are cutting these stone blocks. And you, and myself, we're convinced that's what's going on here. This is one of the monolithic doors. It's at Tiwanaku. It's broken. It's lying on its face. And you see here the sockets underneath it that when it was standing up, some kind of stone or a metal socket pillar would be there to set the monolithic door in, holding it upright. Have another view. Other little indentations and sockets. These are all something on the slab area standing up. Now, you also have these monolithic doors in Persepolis in Iran, and they are identical to the monolithic doors that you have at Tiwanaku. And they're one solid piece of granite that's been cut. Doorway over here is a window that's one solid piece of granite. It's been cut. It's an extremely difficult way of making a doorway, and they're making these things to be indestructible. And even with these jams and this on the inside where they articulate this jam, that's also what you see in Tiwanaku. This is a diagram of just how complicated these doorways are. Cutting them out of solid rock, they're perfectly cut and articulated. It's not something you're going to do with just a rock hammer. This is what one of the clamps looks like when you pour the metal clamps into these stones. So to have these clamps, they find them occasionally, but most of them are gone because wandering tribes are going through and they're just taking the clamps and hammer it into a bag or a spearhead, something like that. Metals are so valuable. Now we're in Egypt, and these are keystone cuts that are in Egypt. And these are at Karnak Temple near Luxor. They have hourglass type keystone cuts here. This one's called an axe head keystone cut. See here, one side is blocked to the other. So in ancient Egypt, they were doing this too. And this is an unusual way of fitting ancient blocks, megalithic blocks of stone. This is a wall at Edfu in southern Egypt. And it also has keystone cuts in it, but they're all completely in the wrong place. These are stones that were assembled by the ancient Egyptians themselves. But they're all in the wrong place. I mean, they really dismantled some other building and then made this wall. And like they closer to put a couple of blocks together, where there would be, two keystone cuts together, but others are just by themselves. And you can't have a keystone cut on a vertical wall like this anyway. I mean, all these stones are not.
The enemy is attacking our base.
They're from some
We must reinforce this defenses.
They're there. They're part of the plan and everything. All right, now let's go to Vietnam. And this is a megalithic site in central Vietnam near Da Nang called My Son. And My Son is a megalithic city, and it also has these same T-shaped keystone cuts, just like at Ollantaytambo, at Tiwanaku, exactly the same thing. It also has the hourglass keystone cuts that you see. And
Enemy aviators are attacking our base. We will stop them.
Extremely hard stuff. And when I was here at Nissan some years ago, I pointed these out to our tour guide. And I said, you see these stone vessels here? And he had never seen them before. He had no idea what they were. I had to explain them to him. And I told him exactly
Our base is destroyed, but we can still win the day.
And it's not part of the archaeology. And he, he thanked me. He's like, yeah, cool. And notice here too, the articulation that this bottom side also, this song, my power song and stuff, and for whatever reason, get this little notches right here that don't have to be there, and could only really be made by power tools. I was born in France, but my parents are American. And I grew up in Colorado. My father was a lawyer and loved to camp, and I was a skier and mountain climber. My parents liked to travel. So I was lucky as a kid, and we went to Stonehenge and the pyramids in Mexico and Greece and Turkey and Hawaii and stuff like that. And I've always been interested in archaeology, Atlantis, UFOs, cryptozoology, psychic phenomenon, all that kind of stuff. And I left, I went to the University of Montana for a while, and then eventually I went to Taiwan as an English teacher. And ultimately I went to Thailand and Burma and Calcutta and Kathmandu. I wanted to go to Tibet and climb in the Himalayas. Edmund Hillary, one of my heroes. After that, I traveled through the Middle East, through Afghanistan and Iran, Turkey, Syria, went to Egypt, traveled through Africa for a couple of years, returned to India and Asia and China, back to the United States, then started going to Central America and South America, and then also to Australia and Pacific Islands. And I am the author of a number of books, and one of my main interests really is megalithic technology, megalith building, and ancient technology. And that's pretty much what we're going to see today. We're going to see, we'll start out with some megaliths around the world, and then we're going to look at some unusual skulls and possible alien craniums and things like that, and then finally some ancient technology. This is what parts of Misan look like today, and this is right on near the border of what was North Vietnam and South Vietnam, and a lot of the fighting in the Vietnam War was around this area, and even this whole site was bombed. Now, who built Misan? Here's the Nang over here. Misan's actually over here. It was the Kam people. They're the ones who are attributed to these buildings. Now, the Kam were a mysterious seafaring people, and in fact, we get the name Kampuchea and Cambodia comes from these people. And this was their main capital, was this island just off of Vietnam. And if you go to Da Nang, there is a museum for the Kam. And you see the Kam people were really Hindus who later became Buddhists. And this is a picture of Shiva. Notice how he's got very kind of wide, thick lips and a wide nose. He doesn't really look very much like a Southeast Asian today or a Vietnamese. Here's another Kam guy. He's got curly, dark hair. He also has a wide nose and thick lips. There's a lot of good statues. This is also a statue that what was there at Misan. This is supposed to be Shiva. Notice the third eye in the middle of his forehead. And he's wearing his hair in this top knot method, which is also what sadhus in India still wear today. The holy men who go underground, they have very long hair and they tie the knot up in their head. And that's also what the statues at Easter Island have their hair like this too. This is also a statue, a Kam statue at Misan. And he's got the wide nose and the thick lips and stuff. And in fact, he looks very Mayan. And if you were to show a picture, this statue, to somebody in Mexico or something, they would say, oh yeah, that's a Mayan statue right there. But it's actually from Vietnam. Here's another Cam statue. He's like Kon-Tiki. He's got a big, thick mustache and a beard, and he's also got the long earlobes. Always depictions of Buddha always have him with very, very long earlobes. And here's a woman who's also a Cam. She's probably depicting Parvati, the consort of Shiva. And at Angkor Wat, which is in Cambodia, and it was really Hindu temples that were later recarved into Buddhist temples. And they have the keystone cuts there and the clamps. And when I was there the first time in 1998, Japanese archaeologists were so excited that they had found these metal clamps there at Angkor Wat, just like at Tiwanaku and at Mison and in Egypt. And at Angkor Wat too, you have these, what appear to be these monolithic windows, very similar to what's at Tiwanaku. This is a megalithic movement from an island off Sumatra, Neon. This is a photo taken in 1915 by Dutch. And this is a rare photo there. So you can see how, yeah, it is possible to manhandle some giant megaliths. Or in this case, they're probably moving some megalith somewhere else. The chief said, well, we gotta move it over here now. So the whole tribe came together. Also in Indonesia, on the island of Sulawesi, is a very oddball valley called Bada Valley. It has very unusual statues that we're going to see. This is Sulawesi, Bada Valley in the middle of this part. It's a remote area, and in fact, roads were only built to Bada Valley about 10 years ago. And this is what Bada Valley looks like when you get there. It's got these oddball megaliths in it. It's a gold mining area. And in fact, the Indonesians claim this is where the earliest form of rice was created. And that primitive rice fields were all started here in Bada Valley. As you walk around Bada Valley, you start to see these unusual kind of tiki-type statues. They're cut out of granite. And they're just in farmers' fields. Archaeologists say that they're 6,000 years old or so. They don't know who built them. People live in Bada Valley. They don't know anything about them. They don't really do anything with them. They're just sitting out there. And this is one of the largest ones you come up to and look at him real carefully. See here the way his nose is, and even finely cut parts of him. Let's look at it here. Yeah, I mean, even his eyes and his nose. I mean, this statue's probably 6,000 years old, but it is just perfectly cut. Once again, it would seem that power tools are being used to cut these statues, and they make them virtually indestructible. The other thing that's at Bada Valley, which is very strange, are these huge granite jars. And they're these vessels, and they're also just out in the fields. They don't know who built them, they don't know what they were for. They're cut out of a single granite boulder. They're hollowed out, and they're made into like a giant wine amphora or something like that. People just have them. They leave them there in their fields and walk around. Look at them. There's hundreds of them. You can see this one is broken, very narrow cut. It's the walls of these granite jars. And to make these, it would seem to be very difficult.
The enemy's getting closer to victory.
Again, if you have the power and tools, it wouldn't be hard to do it all. And there's a place just like this in north-central Laos called the Plain of Jars. And it also has all of these granite jars that are just hollowed out and sitting in the plain that archaeologists are baffled by. They have no idea who did it or why. So this is kind of the same thing. Well, archaeologists are baffled. Also, in northern Cambodia is this site. And here, it's like a Machu Picchu on top of a mountain right on the Cambodian-Thai border. And it's only been the last few years that tourists could go here because the Thai army and the Cambodian army were fighting over this site. and it's on the edge of a cliff. It also has huge lichen patches. It has monolithic doorways in it. Perfectly fitted blocks of granite, huge lichen patches. It's quite an astonishing sight. And you also have keystone cuts here too, just like also at
We are losing.
So here we have also the same T-shaped cuts here at Pria Vigir, like it. This is it, the same kind that are at Tiwanaku. And by the way, mainstream archaeologists are saying there is no connection. There can't be a connection. Absolutely no connection between any of these sites. And this is what they have to say, because this site cannot be connected to what's in Peru and Bolivia or even in Egypt. And what they would have to say is that these people are just utterly independently doing this on their own and creating it. There can't be a connection. We'll go back now, Tiwanaku and Pumapunku. And archaeologists are looking at these H blocks and the buildings there and trying to reconstruct it. And architects, they're looking at that. You have also the blocks of stone that are, again, heavily articulated. I mean, this really has to be done with power tools. All these small little lapping, little shells and stuff. I mean, it's just not something that you're going to do with a stone hammer in your hand. You have to have power tools for this. And again, you're cutting granite when you do it. And part of these stones are built with these famous H blocks. And they're like these Lego blocks that are very uniform and very articulated and fitted together. And so you have these there, it's like some factory with a CAD computer program was just cutting these blocks, and they would be granite, and then spewing them out, and then later they're to be fitted together. So let's have a look at how that would work. So you have these blocks, they're all very uniform, they fit together like a Lego block, and then they have other blocks that can be inserted behind them, they all lock in together. They're going to be this ultimately giant wall of highly articulated, fitted granite. And I have to thank Eric Montgomery for this animation, which is great. So it's showing you really how complicated, sophisticated this whole thing is. It just can't really be done by primitive means of just bashing things down. It's don't have.
Returning to the base.
So anyway, some other artist's impression, what it all looks like. And here we go, at the museum in Tiwanaku, they have this artist depiction, and you have the H blocks and other ones here, and they're fitted together. Here we are, keystone cuts, pouring molten metals fit in there. But once again, you know, it's a mixture of super high tech with very primitive. And you know, the guy's over here with his campfire, you know, melting some metals, and you know, they're wearing these simple cotton tunics. You know, they're not dressed in some fancy way or anything like that. So yeah, you know, this is what the mainstream has to say. Yeah, you know, these guys are just a bunch of primitive guys. They don't know writing, they don't know the wheel or anything, but you know, they're going to do something pretty basic stuff. So also near to Tiwanaku is a pyramid, and this is a man-made pyramid. You can see it from Tiwanaku, but it's not recognized as an authentic archaeological site. And the Bolivian government, you know, they've turned a blind eye to this, and it's because there's a village here, and that village is building this pyramid, and they're doing their own private excavation of this pyramid site and taking artifacts, and they're selling it. And Bolivia, you know, doesn't have a lot of rules and regulations and stuff like this can happen. And I asked our guide, I was the one telling us about this, and I said, well, let's go there, we're gonna see this thing. And we were able to drive part of the way, but we only, you know, we got up this dirt road and see the village right. Stopped the minibus, and he said, we can't go any farther than this. He said, you know, villagers will not let us in the village. and they privately keep everyone out because they're looting the site essentially. Now, the things that came out of this pyramid are some interesting objects. One is the Hodaki monolith. Hodaki monolith is a granite statue that's 3-4 feet high, and it's been broken, and it's got a turban on, and along the side of his thigh on both sides is Sumerian writing.
A little more effort.
Sumerian writing
will be
is on this granite monolith. Sumerian experts have looked at it and they've said, yeah, this is Sumerian writing. Today, this monolith is in the Gold Museum, the Museum of Precious Metals in La Paz, but it's not on display. So, I mean, there are photos of it, and when we went there with Ancient Aliens once, because Ancient Aliens paid them, they brought it out of this vault, and we were all able to examine it and photograph it, and it is part of an episode of Ancient Aliens. And here's some of the Sumerian symbols that are on the Hodaki monolith. The Sumerians wrote in hieroglyphs. They had a number of languages and written scripts. They had hieroglyphic symbols, and they also had cuneiform writing. Now, what is also in the museum, the Precious Metals Museum in La Paz, this is Bolivia's official museum, is this, and this is called the Fuente Magna. And the Fuente Magna, it is on display, although you're not supposed to take photos of it. But, let it not take a photo, there. And it has Sumerian writing on it, too. It has cuneiform writing right here, and it's a ceramic bowl. And it has Sumerian hieroglyphic writing. And in fact, here we go. Got here, the hieroglyphic writing, cuneiform writing. And this is the guy who found it. In fact, Maximiliano, he lived near that pyramid I'm showing you, and he actually found the Fuente Magna in 1960. And he just used it in his yard, he put it in his backyard, and he used it to feed his pigs. And then one day a priest noticed what he was this bowl and all that, and he
let's keep the pressure on. Victory is close.
And what they did was they traded him a house, and he got a new one house, and then they brought the bowl on. But that was 1960. And for all those years, they just kept it out of display, and then finally, around 2005, they put the bowl on display, and it is. If you go to the Precious Metals Museum, this is something that cannot be there. In mainstream archaeology, this is an impossible artifact. It simply cannot be there. It's a minefield in archaeology. There cannot be a Sumerian bowl in Bolivia. I mean, this upsets all of mainstream archaeology and turns it on its head. This thing, I mean, it's officially in Bolivian. And I'm convinced that if this bowl had been found in Peru, it would not. Bolivia is something of a rogue nation. They don't want other companies not to do it, and that's a good thing. But in Peru is more, they're going to do what mainstream archaeologists tell them. And if this was in a museum in Peru, American archaeologists and others would go there and they would say, not something we should have. Because it can be. I mean, Sumerians cannot have ancient Tiwanaku have built it. In fact, in a sense, show that they had it on. And then they're building. And in fact, this Sumerian writing, this is from 4,000, 5,000 BC. So this is just something that cannot be there. And in fact, National Geographic or some other major archaeological magazine, they will never, ever talk about it. They can't. It just upsets everything. And it will only be, all they can do is ignore it. And just ignore it, never talk about it. But it's shows like Ancient Aliens where you actually will see artifacts like this. And it's in a museum. It's completely real. This is some of the Sumerian hieroglyphs that you might see. So at Tiwanaku, if you go to the museum, this is a ceramic. This is what the Aymara Indians, people who look like around there today. And it's said that Aymara is supposedly a Sumerian. They're speaking ancient Sumerian. He's got the big nose. He's wearing a turban, typical Bolivian type Indian. But these are guys from Tiwanaku too. Like, look at this guy. He looks very, very Oriental, like he's some Chinese guy. And then the guy up here, he also, he's some Tiwanaku guy too, but he's got a thick mustache and a beard. He's a Tiwanaku guy too, but you know, he looks like he's from Mediterranean or some Phoenician guy or something. This is a display that's at the museum there at Tiwanaku of some of the unusual craniums. And in fact, they've taken this off display. You cannot see it now. And what you would see there would be some of these guys, elongated skulls, like this one. He's got unusually elongated skull. And now we'll see more of that. So let's go to Peru now and to the desert areas of Peru. We're going to go to Paracas right here, and also this town here, Ica. It's the main capital. This has a major museum. Nazca, all the famous lines, it's down here. Lima, the capital of Peru, is up here. And this is very much a desert area of Peru. And you get here, because it is so dry, you're going to get a lot of these unusual craniums, including like this guy. He's got an elongated skull. And these guys. And they're all from Baraka, from Ica, people with extremely elongated skulls, easily double the size of our skull, of our teeth. And I mean, some of these guys are pretty unusual. There are ways, archaeologists know this, taking babies and putting their head, while they're still infants, placing their head and fused together and bind the skull and then force it into its shape. But then it's starting to fuse up here and various problems, stuff with that. This guy here from Congo, one of the more extreme elongated skulls. Not the kind of guy you want to meet in a dark alley, probably. And those skulls are coming here from this, in many cases, from this pyramid. It's a real pyramid called the Chongo's Pyramid. Here's close. So a lot of these skulls are coming. So again, some of these guys, I mean, some of them have kind of boxy heads. You know, there's still hair on them. They're very well preserved. Absolutely real. In archaeology, taking them out of. Now this skull is particularly unusual. And this may be really evidence of alien skull. Because of the way that he's an elongated, prone-head guy too. But what's happened here is that the seams of the top of his head are not the way a normal human's head would come together, ultimately knit, and become an adult. So start growing. So with this guy, yeah, what he has is this just one seam here up the skull. Down the other seams going back. So the idea is here that are there some people who are naturally elongated skulls, and they're not being manipulated. They're not. It's not a binding technique like you would find something like that. They naturally. That's a good question. And even the people who do head binding and cranial deformation, we call it, they wonder, okay, some people are doing this artificially, but why are they doing it? They're trying, at the very least, they're trying to imitate other people. And they're saying that, the gods, the ancient kings, they all look like this. We want to look like this. And so, even small infants or fetuses also have heads that they're looking for. You have other techniques too that are done, which is called tree panning. Tree panning is where you're using a saw or a drill and you're cutting a hole in the head. And we don't exactly know why they were doing this. It kind of is like brain surgery of some sort. And this guy, this is from a museum in Lima, and he had a gold plate put in his head. And he survived all this. And later his skull grew over the gold plate, and he lived for many years after he'd had this big cut in his head. You have also many of the skulls. Not everybody has these elongated skulls. I mean, some of them are, some of them aren't. And many of them have red hair, which is an unusual thing too. Also in this area is what's called the Candlestick of the Andes. This is this huge sort of candlestick thing that's etched into a mountain that can be seen from the ocean and easily seen from the air as well. Would seem to be some kind of indicator saying to either ancient mariners and to even people in airships, yeah, this is the place right here. And even that, Titicaca or something it's over that way. As you go farther south, then you get into the famous Nazca Plain with all of its many lines and figures and things like that. And tomorrow, Eric Mondon is going to show you a lot more about this, and he has some great video and stuff of it. These elongated skulls are also in Mexico, and the ancient Olmecs who lived in central Mexico, they had the elongated skulls too. They were doing all this. And there's some Olmec guys from Comacalco. This is what they look like. These big eyes, also wide noses, thick lips. They have elongated heads. And you have some of these guys too who have their heads smashed in, and we call them pumpkin heads. And so rather than having an elongated skull, they have this smashed out pumpkin skull. This one is from the museum in Merida in the Yucatan, and would be some Mayan or Olmec or Toltec skull. So this is the kind of binding that you would use on an infant's head. Really, you want to do this to very young, babies who are just, 6 months old or something like that. And then you do it gradually throughout their years up to probably around the time they're 6 or 7 or 8 years old or something like that. So that would be the techniques. Now the Olmecs were a group that were completely unknown to archaeologists until 1940. And up to that time, mainstream archaeologists were saying that the Mayans were the oldest civilization group in Mesoamerica and in Mexico. But then archaeologists realized that there was this other civilization before them. And they didn't have a name for them. They called them the Olmecs, the rubber people. And in 1940, they brought archaeologists from all over the world to Mexico City at this big conference where they announced this new culture, and they called it the Olmecs. And the Olmecs are these pre-Mayans. They're a megalithic culture. They have these giant basalt heads called colossal heads. They weigh about 20 tons each. They're found in Guatemala. They're found on the Gulf Coast of Mexico, particularly in the oil area. They're buried in swamps. Most of these heads had to be dug out with bulldozers and stuff. There's a lot of oil exploration in that area. They're in Guatemala too, where they just would find them in sugarcane fields and uncover them. Huge basalt boulders and things like that. Many of them look, again, very African, in fact. Some of them are very, very finely cut. Notice the thick lips and the wide nose here. He's wearing some kind of strange like helmet or turban. He looks very African, really. And also like the Khmer guys in Vietnam. And again, mainstream is saying like, oh yeah, no, these are just American Indians. Yeah, they look like Africans, but they're not Africans. And they were buried. I mean, people didn't find these until 1930s when they started digging up and bulldozing through these swamps and stuff in the Tabasco area, particularly of eastern Mexico. And what they found there too was that cities like La Venta, which they think was the capital city of the Olmecs, that it was a pre-planned city, that it had a very sophisticated irrigation and water systems were all part of it. And the whole area of the Olmecs, the heartland area, is what's called the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. It's the narrowest part of Mexico. So Comacalco's up here in La Venta, we were just looking at. But this area here too, on the Pacific, is also an Olmec area. And Monte Alban, which is a city, it's also an Olmec city, there they cut the top of this mountain off. So the Olmecs were on the Pacific and Atlantic side. And it was they could control both trade on both oceans. This is an Olmec statue too. This is at Jalapa, one of the big Olmec sites and Olmec museums. And look at this guy. He's got a false beard, just like Egyptians would have. And even his headdress is very much a sort of Egyptian cowl kind of thing that Egyptians famously wore. He's an Olmec too. He's an Olmec statue, and he's holding a rubber ball. These are the guys who invented the ball game. The rubber ball games that we use today for basketball and baseball and football and all the ball games really started here. This is an Olmec head too, and this is an unusual one. And mainstream archaeologists noticed this, that something was going on here. This is a basalt head, weighs about 20 tons, but it's got all these dish marks on it. And archaeologists also thought this was strange. Somebody, with like a power tool, just was defacing it. I mean, they were just decided they had a power tool, and they didn't like this guy anymore, and they just taken their power tool, their grinder, or whatever.
Pilots, your mission is to destroy the enemy's ground equipment and bases.
Dish marks on it, just because they could. They're defacing it. And archaeologists by how and why. It didn't make sense. The same thing was going on in the back of the statue. That's also an Olmec statue, the Villahermosa part, in the same area. And it's like somebody was taking their power drill and just dishing out little drill spots, just playing with their power tools. Because they could, practicing their own tools that they had. At Titicaca, which is Olmec site, which later became a Mayan site, they display was there. And I thought it was a really cool display, and it's showing all these different ceramics and figurines and stuff that they found at Titicaca. And it was all pretty bizarre. I mean, here's some kind of standard looking Olmec guy over here. You have this strange guy, and standard Olmec guy. But then you have guys like this guy here, looking very Chinese. This guy up here, also very Oriental. All these different pieces. This guy here, weird guys. Some of them have the famous Olmec crown. They have taken this one as well. Again, archaeologists went there and they thought, too weird. It's too strange for tourists to look at. Well, this is also an Olmec votive offering made out of jade. It was found at Venta and stays in the big museum in Mexico City. And these are what are called jade kelps. It's all jade. These are these Olmec figurines. They have elongated skulls. They kind of oriental, but also sort of negroid at the same time. And there's a kind of early writing on and inscriptions on the back of these kelps. And in 1999, they brought from Beijing, China, they bought the top epigrapher on Shang Chinese glyphs to look at these glyphs here. And Shang Chinese glyphs are the earliest of all Chinese writing, going back to 4,000, 5,000 BC. And he said that the glyphs on the back of these jade kelps was Shang Chinese writing. You also have these deformed heads in Egypt, and Akhenaten and Nefertiti also have these elongated heads. This is one of their daughters, Baraka, and she's also a cone head too. She's got this big elongated head, and this is not the result of incest or anything like that. This is a purposefully done, elongated of the head, or else they look like this. And we find this too in the Kurdistan, the Kurds, Yazidis, you'll find this. In Malta, they also have these elongated heads. And even Tutankhamun, he was a cone head too. And statues in his own tomb depict him as having this elongated head. And although you never hear about it when you read all these articles, they never talk about him having this elongated head. Also, a trunk in Tutankhamun's tomb contained a dozen boomerangs, and they're on display in the Cairo Museum. The Egyptians also used boomerangs too. So boomerangs were used all over the world. Tutankhamun, she loved boomerangs. And boomerangs have been found in Poland and Denmark, Florida, also in the American Southwest. If you go to Iraq, and these are the famous Ubaid figures from northern Iraq, from an excavated town called Ubaid, and they have what archaeologists call the coffee bean eyes, also have these elongated heads. These are authentic, they're ceramic figurines, and archaeologists think that, yeah, these are the Anunnaki guys, coffee bean eyes, elongated heads, yeah, I mean, totally real. So, yeah, we're now looking at that, and the Sumerians. So these are the Sumerian figures, these conch heads, and then of course we have Sumerian writing, even in ancient China, they depict these, many of the Taoist immortals were depicted as having these big, elongated heads, some of them pretty extreme, and these pumpkin heads as well. And you don't, in China, you don't get a lot of skeletal material because you need to preserve these ancient sculptures. You need a really dry environment. Korea too, excavations there that you found elongated skulls. And even the Chinook Indians near Seattle, they were famous for this too, having these pointed heads, elongated heads. And it's something they were doing to manipulate. The island of Vanuatu also is famous for having elongated heads and things like that. And they're doing that just up until today. There's still some island of Vanuatu that's still elongating its heads. And so we know that, the heads can be manipulated by little babies. We know that. There's no question of that. But it's why they're doing it. Whether some people actually have elongated heads. This is from the northern Congo in Africa. Photos there by Dutch anthropologists, about like 20. This little kid, his head is found. And this is what, a baby head has been found. Infant. People are doing this all over the world. And to say the least, this is an unusual thing to do. But once again, mainstream archaeologists are saying, well, there's no connection. They're all doing it completely independent for no real reason to say it. And there's absolutely no connection between any of these. And this worldwide headline going on. Here's an interesting thing. Let's just go the other way. Small mini people. This was the Pedro Mountain mummy, which was discovered in 1930 in Wyoming. Prospectors grabbed this thing only about a foot and a half high. He was in a meditative posture. These prospectors were dynamiting these cliffs, looking for veins of gold and stuff. And so they emerged into this small cave, and this little man was sitting there in a meditative, like lotus position. And they took photos of him. They brought him to Chicago. There they x-rayed him. And, it's totally legal. He's this tiny, miniature person. And in fact, it's said by people who know a lot of experts in yoga positions that he's in a special yoga position. That's the name. I'm not really exactly that one would be. He vanished. And in 1950, he was sold to somebody. Said, yeah, I'll buy that. It's cool, how much do you want? And after that, it was never seen again. Nobody knows where it is. I mean, apparently somebody bought him to get him off out of mainstream view and make sure he wasn't in a museum. And today he's completely missing, and that's why there's a $10,000 reward for this guy. The salmon ruins in New Mexico, they also found these slabs which had elephants. That's interesting. We'll go real quickly now to Bogota in Colombia. We were just there, and there's some unusual things there. Starting in the 1930s, they began excavating. They started finding all these giant statues that were there. Weird kind of stuff, many of it very Egyptian, very Olmec, just buried in these mountain jungle areas. It's a gold mining area. A lot of these guys had kind of gorgon, big teeth and vampire teeth and stuff like that. Others, they're holding unusual things, collars and stuff. Finely made granite blocks, weird buildings. Again, giant basalt sarcophagi. All of it just buried. This is what the area looks like right now. The dolmens, here are these strange things. Here, look at this guy. Very similar to Bada Valley. His eyes and his nose. Very finely cut. I mean, this again, it would be only done with power tools on very hard granite blocks. This is what it looks like, dolmens and things. You see these guys. Weird looking guys. Very strange. Some of them have oddball things on their backs, like jetpacks or something like that. And here's a woman, very well made. She's wearing this oddball hat. This guy, he was a ceramic. They call him the spaceman. He's a cool-looking guy. So apparently, this is what these guys look like. They were making this stuff in San Agustin and Querétaro there in Western Colombia. The Gold Museum in Bogota has many of the gold artifacts that came out of this area, like this guy. Some are pretty interesting, futuristic, sci-fi looking dudes. This guy, I call him the fireman. Seems to have a big mustache and stuff. There's big gold sun discs and stuff like that. There's at the Cory Concha. Even things that look like big saw blades and stuff like that. Gold saw technically machine, although gold alloy. If you have a lot of gold, you can use it as an alloy. And also even crystal artifacts and jade artifacts that are drilled through quartz crystal. So, and to drill through quartz crystal like that require power tools and drills and things like that to drill through the very difficult quartz. This guy here, he's also from that area. He's a cone head. He's got the elongated head, just like we were seeing in Egypt and stuff. It's the same people. This is like Olmecs site. Of course, mainstream archaeologists are saying, oh no, these are some isolated people just doing all this on their own, being weird. This guy's cool, ceramic, looks quite oriental. And when you go to and there in the Gold Museum is a display of these gold airplanes. Just like Duncan's wearing one now, and Eric Von Donick, and they have these. I mean, they look like gold airplanes. Mainstream archaeologists have to explain this, and they're saying, oh, well, they're flying fish, or, they're bees, or they're birds or something. But birds don't have tails like this. And, there's literally about 40 of these things on display. But you know what? I mean, they depict flying fish too. I mean, here's a flying fish as a gold pendant. So they can do that, but they got these gold airplanes. And the whole idea that they had flight, if you read the Ramayana, and Eric's going to talk a lot about this tomorrow, this is at the Bangkok airport. This is Rama on his flying chariot of the gods, going some places. And to have flight, you need metals, you need machines, you need electricity. And they had electricity in ancient times, we know that. They had machines, like the Antikythera device, which was found in 1900 in a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera. And in fact, it wasn't until the 1950s that American archaeologists started examining the Antikythera device, which is in the Athens Museum today. And they said, yeah, this is more complicated than any Swiss clock. They had never imagined that the Greeks had anything like this, these complicated machines and cog devices and stuff. And things like this too, which is at Dendera. This is totally authentic. You have these cables coming out of this thing. They're attached to this some kind of device. It looks like some kind of light bulb. You have the serpent here as like a filament. These are Jed columns associated with Osiris. You have some baboon Thoth god here with a knife. You have these mini guys here doing stuff. This whole scene is pretty bizarre, and it seems to depict electrical light. And it's completely real. So mainstream archaeologists have to explain this too. There has to be an explanation, and it can't be that it's electrical light. Because, they didn't have light. It has to be something else. Here's their explanation. This is a lotus flower here. And this is the aroma. That's the explanation. Also, now at the Abydos Temple, which is nearby, up on this high lintel, about 40 feet off the ground, is these things carved into it. And this is totally real too. Something that looks like a helicopter. Other things here that look like submarines. There's something here looks like a jet. This also looks like some kind of jet here. It's completely real. And now the mainstream has to explain this too. And their explanation, which is not a bad one actually, is that these things is that two hieroglyphs are superimposed on each other. And there, there was a hieroglyph there, and then 1,000 years, the priests came and they chiseled another hieroglyph on it, and they plastered it up, and then the plaster fell down. It's two hieroglyphs together. And that does explain a couple of them. But I've been told by Egyptologists that this one here looks like a little jet plane, that they don't have an explanation for that. That it's not any hieroglyph they know or see. It's unique. So, yeah, the whole idea of flight that people had, I mean, just like today, we have spaceships, we have airplanes, but we still have ships, all the cargo is still trafficked by ships across oceans. And we have this thing from Panama. This is also what's called a zoomorphic glyph. It's about a 4-inch long gold pendant. But it seems to be, it's like a monster, but it seems to be a backhoe. It's like heavy equipment. And it has a stone on it, and he's got a breastplate in front of him. But it's this whole part back here. This is what's called a zoomorphic glyph in the sense that it's like heavy machinery, some kind of backhoe or something, but it's been turned into essentially, a monster, which then became this jewelry. They found it in tombs. This is actually a thing in a monastery in Chinese records and stories of flight. Kemper Nagas from Ethiopia, which has stories of King Solomon and his son flying between Israel and Ethiopia and things like that. And of course, the whole thing is flying discs. Discs that are made to fly through the air, and then these guys on it. And right there. And thanks everybody.
Destroy the target! Attack the enemy! Attack the enemy! Commencing attack!
Well, thank you to all of you, and thank you to Denmark for this opportunity. We've been through a lot of interesting discussions, which are in some ways quite depressing, like what you see on the screen, and what you still see on the screen, and all of this, all of this chaos.
Our victory is near.
Anger we have about the fact that we have been and are being lied to by so-called officials, like this one as well. And what I would like to do is I'd actually like to try to uplift you, because history, as we've been taught in school, to some degree is a lie. And I wouldn't call it conspiracy theory, but what I would call it is people closely guarding information and refusing to open themselves up to scrutiny for other people coming in and offering additional.
We're ahead of the enemy.
So this is the typical story we've been told of humanity that we evolved from primitive
Attack the enemy!
we being quote-unquote
Somebody attack him!
evolved to existence. And Satan society taught over and over that Homo sapiens, who we are, started out approximately 200,000 years ago, and for the majority of that time, we lived in this state of the hunter-gatherer. And then maybe 10,000 years ago, people got the idea to start living communally, and that now in the 21st century we have the city of Shanghai, and this is supposed to be the ultimate example of the expression of humanity. The two places that I'm intimate with and want to discuss are mainly Peru and Bolivia, and also Egypt, because they spiritually and in terms of tourism, etc., are, except for Egypt at the moment, the hottest places for people to go to in order to study ancient things. But the thing is that we have left the history of both of these places and much of the rest of the world, if not all the world, to a small group of people who generally called archaeologists and anthropologists to tell us the history of humanity. And the problem I had with the first trip I made to Peru, the fact that I saw buildings of such phenomenal construction, that what the archaeologists told me was that these tools, bronze chisels and stone hammers, which were the highest level of technical sophistication both in ancient Egypt and in Peru, were responsible for all of the construction that I was looking at. So through the course of time, I've had the ability to bring engineers, stonemasons, geologists, and other experts outside of the archaeological field in to look at them and tell me from their perspective how this was done. And 100% of the time, they said that those tools could not have been responsible. And it clearly was not cultures afterwards because of the great antiquity. So what I'd like to start you with is the Inca. The Inca were the largest civilization in pre-Columbian America, but nobody actually knows where the Inca came from after all this 800 years of their history. Supposedly they came from the area of Lake Titicaca, and the archaeological evidence tells us that they most likely came from the island to the side of the island of Moon in Lake Titicaca. And what's important is what we're looking at is an Inca building. That's how the Inca built their structures, using bronze chisels and stone hammers. This is on the island of Poseidon, and this is also on the island of Poseidon. You can imagine, whether you work with stone or not, that with that level of technology, this is achievable. As well as this. This is the same kind of construction with adobe mud as well. However, the other idea is that the Inca came from a place called Titicaca, which is in Bolivia. The problem we have with the site of Titicaca is not only that it looks more sophisticated, but the entire place was reconstructed by French and Bolivian archaeologists in the 1960s. They put these buildings back together without any reference. They interpreted what they were doing, and they honestly made a complete mess of it. Because this, for example, is called the sun gate, is a single piece of stone. The crack you see happened much after it was built. But it weighs 10 tons, and it was moved from its quarry 70 kilometers away. The question is, how did ancient primitive people move it? There are no trees at that elevation of 13,000 feet. So it's one of the many enigmatic things we'll look at. The other is this surface. And I took an engineer called Christopher Dunn, who had been to the site of Pumapunku, which is also at Titicaca, to look at this. And he has instruments, because he works in the aviation industry, he has precision measuring instruments, which are technically almost perfect. And this stone, for example, over the space of at least 20 foot, if not longer, the surface does not
Attack the enemy!
Also what we find at these sites, and we find them in all of the megalithic, which means massive stone sites, are these strangely elongated stars. The problem is that this display, for example, the human option has been shut down. You're not allowed to visit the skulls anymore. That could be conspiracy. But no one has ever carbon dated these skulls, and no one has ever DNA tested these skulls. So the archaeologists automatically assume that these people, or single beings, were directly responsible for these constructions, and that is insufficient. Even the Inca people were all, or are always portrayed like this. They are very Indian looking, they have long black hair. The problem is that when the Spanish arrived in Peru, and the reason why they were able to overtake the Incas was the Incas were involved in a civil war of the entire royal population were the actual kingdom. The Inca was not the population, which was the royal family. They had been exterminated. So this is what Spanish portrait painters interpreted as being
The enemy's getting closer to victory.
things that they look like, but we don't honestly know. So what we do know is that the Inca had to leave the Titicaca area about 900 AD because of a very massive flood. So they wound up going north into this area called the Sacred Valley, which is outside of Cusco. The Sacred Valley is called that because it's been agriculturally productive for thousands of years. In order to develop any level of high-education at the location, water is abundant, and be able to grow huge amounts of food is what is critically important. So, as the Incas traveled from Lake Titicaca to Cusco, they encountered an earlier culture called Wari. This is Wari construction. Again, very simple. But then what archaeologists say is that as soon as the Incas started to build the city of Cusco, they did this kind of work. But what you'll see, again, up above, you'll see that is Inca style, but it's based on a foundation of megalithic blocks. And the megalithic work is far more sophisticated than what the Inca did. So this is insinuating that the megalithic wall is older. And this building, called the Coricancha, which is in Cusco, is believed to have been the first building that the Inca ever built. And again, there is no mortar, there's no clay, there's no cement, there's no glue. This is stone on top of stone. And the precision of the construction is so tight-fitting, you cannot fit a human hair in between the blocks. And inside of the Coricancha, we find strange shaped stones which have no real explanation archaeologically. They're just kind of jumbled up in piles because they don't fit in, again, with the picture that we're being told. And this is my favorite because this is a drill hole in a stone. It's about this long, but both ends of the stone are broken, so we have no idea how far that hole went. And if you look at the scarring marks horizontally, going this way, you can see, and engineers have backed this up, modern engineers, that it must have been some kind of boring tool that was a very high vibration. It wasn't a drill that moved like this. It was a very high vibrational cutter. The teeth would have had to have been something like diamond in order to cut through, because this is harder than granite. But again, it's an artifact which archaeologists basically don't want to discuss. And then this is a stone tub or container of some kind, which is in the very center of this building. And the flowers that are planted around it are not just there to look good. You are literally not allowed to step inside and photograph what this is, because somebody doesn't want this artifact studied. But what's intriguing is that about 10 years ago, a team was allowed to do excavations at number 8, which is this building, the Coricancha, and up on top at number 1, which is Sacsayhuaman. And they found a tunnel system cut through solid bedrock, connecting one with the other. The Inca could not have done that. So what I'm telling you is I believe that Cusco was an ancient city that was abandoned for some reason, and after thousands of years, the Inca went to Cusco, rebuilt their city, but now because of their construction and then Spanish construction and modern construction, it's difficult to see the oldest parts. But as you train your eyes, and this is what our tours do, you automatically see the different periods of building. The oldest is always the biggest stone and always the finest stone, and that's counter to what we're taught about society. Even in Inca times, the Coricancha building and where that tub is was called the center or the navel of the world. And it's from there that they believed energy moved out either from the center out or from the outside in. And I believe that's a concept that the Inca inherited from some energetic principle which is still at work inside this building. And as we step outside the Coricancha, there is this street here which is aligned to the winter solstice, which is an interesting thing. But more importantly, when you go up close to this, again, on this side, this is Inca work, but it's built on top of something larger and older. And that's a simple indication that somebody was there previously of a higher level of technical ability. And again, excavations have been done. These elongated skulls show up, and they have not been carbon-14 tested for age, neither have they been DNA tested, but they're labeled as being Inca. And outside of this building, the Coricancha, again, it becomes more and more obvious. You're looking at Inca work here, probably Inca work up there, reconstruction of the wall here, and then that, which is the finest built wall in the Americas. Again, in many places, you cannot fit a human hair in between the stones, and it's more than a meter thick. It's not hollow. It's continuous. And that would not be impossible today, but would be an incredible technical challenge. As well, we find these strange knobs exposed, and there has been no proper reasoning as to why they exist. There's another type of construction that these ancient builders, who I actually call the Iroquois, and that is from a very obscure manuscript written by a 17th century Spanish chronicler who was victimized by all the other historians. His name was Fernando de Montesinos, and he learned from what was left of the ancient priesthood that there was a race of people who appeared after what they called the flood. They built the city, and Peru comes from the name Iroquois. But what's intriguing about this is that you can see that it's polygonal construction. Every stone is a different shape and size. And the conventional story is that the Inca would find a stone of approximately the right shape it, put it into place, find something else, something that would fit somehow, and then shape it and fit it into place. But when you learn from the people of the area, what you find out is the builders, whoever they were, also put pictograms or animal figures into their construction. In this case, it's the shape of a puma, there and there. So that makes their construction job even more complex, because again, there's no mortar in between, and mortar is not used even in modern times as something that strengthens the building. It's actually weaker than the building material. Concrete is not as hard in general as stone. So to do construction without mortar is much more difficult than to do with mortar. And the Greeks, the Romans, those great people, they all use mortar to fill in spaces that they were constructing. And here again we have another example. It's an interesting shape, and it's the shape of a snake.
Commencing attack!
Now, it's not only in Peru that we find this kind of work. This is actually in the Imperial Palace.
Attention to the designated grid zone!
Again, it's a vault section, which is not talked about. Because it's
Coming!
it's said to have been built at the same time.
I agree!
This is another precise, non-mortar fitting together. And the Easter Island Polynesians were not Bronze Age, they were Stone Age people. So how could they shape basalt, which is so hard, so tight-fitting, to construct something? The other thing a lot of you may not know is that the so-called Easter Island heads, of which there are more than 900, none of them are heads. Every single one is a full body. So here you see the excavation of one going down. And Thor Heyerdahl in the 1950s was the first to discover this. And the best example is here. They dug down, they were able to go down at least to where the statue itself
Our
was
victory
really
is
laid.
here.
It went down to the navel, and that's another reason why Easter Island's ancient name symbolically is called the navel of the world. I was there with Dr. Robert Shaw, who was the geologist who was able to redate the Sphinx in Egypt as being older than the dynastic Egyptians because he is an expert on the weathering of stone. And he, as a PhD geologist from Boston University, has no problem to say that he believes some of these were constructed at least 12,000 years. And we'll get into the later things about that. There's another site some of you may have heard about called Göbekli Tepe, which I've not been to, but which is in Turkey. And it seems to have been buried either on purpose or as a result of a cataclysm at least 10 to 12,000 years ago. And again, the timeline we're told is that Sumeria, Egypt, China, and India were the beginnings of civilization 6,000 years ago. And even as early as, or as recent as last week, Graham Hancock, who was there at Göbekli Tepe, the latest carbon-14 testing they found of the soil in the area shows that some of these are at least 14,000 years ago. And this is only a tiny piece of the site. There may be, this site, which looks reasonably large, could be at least 30 times as large as it is. And this just shows you more of what Göbekli Tepe looks like. And this shows you the scale. Now this, I believe, is actually what Inca construction looked like at its height. The finest work they did, and this could have been achieved with bronze chisels and stone hammers. And what also happens is because the Spanish deconstructed a lot of Cusco in order to build their own buildings when they arrived in 1833 and afterwards, they took the buildings apart which were Inca because they were quite small stones, the size of a shoebox or a little bit better. And so what this shows us on the interior is, I think, that what the Inca were doing were replicating the work of the older people. The interior of this wall, you can see, is fill. And but the front looks really nice and tight. But this, again, because this wall has been taken apart partially, the front of it is a veneer appearance of being beautiful stone construction. But because it separates as it goes back, the Inca were cheating by trying to achieve the same tightness of work. And this, again, is back in the Coricancha. And from the front of the wall, because this one was broken, from the front to the back, again a distance of about a meter. In many cases, you cannot get a human hair. And all it would take would be a few millimeters of one dividend of lower stone to be raised up, and one would pivot on the other. They don't. They fit perfectly, and they are beyond earthquake. Now again, these very ancient people, the so-called Kirwas, and some call them the Viracochas, are depicted in sculpture at the site called Titicaca. And what you can see is in the depictions, they're shown to have beards. And that is not a Native American characteristic. And this is where Thor Heyerdahl got his Kon-Tiki image from that was on his sail. Because these ancient people were called Kon-Tiki Viracocha. And he was vilified by the scientific community for his theories that people were able to move across the Pacific and other oceans thousands of years before the Europeans did. thing is, at least Thor Heyerdahl had the guts to build a ship and get on board and test it. Most academics sit behind a chair and argue back the problem. This is one of the most profound sites in Peru, and this is called Sacsayhuaman. And here you see the size of the people compared to the size of the building blocks. Some of these stones are 125 tons, and local guides will say that the quarry was right there, but it's more likely that the quarry is at least 72 kilometers away and at a altitude almost 1,000 meters lower than this location. So how do those stones move?
The enemy's getting closer to victory.
Some Russian geologists took samples from this site and analyzed it, and they honestly believe that what it is concrete. Not concrete you can pour, but some kind of concrete you can shape. And that the wall itself, the stone on the surface, has been heat treated to at least 1,000 degrees Celsius. This is not something you do with a bonfire as you're working. And here I am. This just shows you again the sense of scale. But also these people decided to do pictograms. So above my head is actually the shape of a puma's paw on the four toes. And again, also at Sacsayhuaman, we see examples of this, where you have this incredible cutting precision in stone, which is the so-called boat scale hardness of material. Diamonds 10, the ultimate in that material. This stone is about 7. Bronze is about 3.5. You can't cut stone like this with bronze tools. It would be like trying to cut a tree down with a plastic knife. It's impossible. The tool has to be harder than the material. But not only that, it is perfectly level, within 1/10 of 1 degree. And some people say this was a quarry, but if it was a quarry, why would you be so precise about cutting the surface perfectly level like that? And in the area, we find these other cutout stones like this, and the weathering on this is so excessive that I'm hoping that Dr. Robert Schock will come in July of next year and be able to tell us when the stone cutting was actually achieved, because it's not like there are 1 or 10 or 50 stones like this. In the area of Cusco and the Sacred Valley, according to Jesus Gamarra, who is the local expert, there are more than 5,000 of them. So when people say this was an Inca throne, there were a lot of Inca, obviously. And this one is even more dramatic, because if you see the front, this one here and that one, and even the one in behind, at one time all three were interconnected. Something happened to this massive stone with an upside down staircase. It's much larger than a bus. Something caused it to snap into 3 pieces. It could have been a very ancient cataclysm. And again, we find just structure after structure. It looks molded, or like concrete or something. And again, you know, another example as we get closer to this, which is called Amaru Machai. Again, you see the erosion of it. This is very hard limestone, but it's unlikely. Though we need a geologist to corroborate it, it's unlikely that this is the result of weathering during the time of the Incas. It looks too old, and if you've ever been to Turkey, you see a lot of this kind of thing too. And there's talk of sites in Turkey being thousands and thousands of years old, like Göbekli Tepe is. On the interior of this one, there are surfaces which are so polished, some people again say that whoever did the work applied some kind of high heat to it to melt the surface and make it glass-like. And this is another example of that. And here is a site called Pisac, and you can see the wall in the front is of much higher quality than the work in the back, but it's all said to have been done at the same time. And how would you have people of such different technical ability working side by side to create such a difference in construction? And one of our favorite sites is in a cave outside of Cusco. And this actually is not on the tourist map, and as far as I know has not been discussed by archaeologists much. It's just an astonishing sculpting of a stone surface with unknown tools. And inside the same cave, we have this, which is kind of inexplicable because it's a false door and it doesn't go anywhere. But somebody was able to cut into the stone surface like that, one would presume with reasonable ease. And again, we have the same kind of symbol, but what is kind of important about this is that what we see at most of the major Inca, so-called Inca sites, is you'll see 3 levels of construction. You see this, which is very precise cutting and shaping. Next to it, you have stones interlocking into it without mortar. And then in the back, you have mortar work. And the work in the back we know is Inca, but whoever did this other, we honestly, we theorize. Now, this is a very famous symbol for anyone who has been to Peru. It's called the Chicana, which means the Andean cross. And it, though being a simple symbol, is incredibly complicated in terms of what all of these angles and facets represent. But what's kind of more intriguing is where you see it says Ruta Viracocha, and that means the way of Viracocha, the path of Viracocha. And if you look at a map of Peru, including Bolivia, there is this so-called path, and along it, all of the major archaeological sites of super great antiquity, including Tiwanaku, Pucara, Cusco, Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo, and Cajamarca are all
Attention to the designated grid zone!
narrow band of that one specific line for some very strange reason. And at the site of Ollantaytambo, which is actually one of the largest complexes in Peru, or actually the world, we distinctly see very different styles of construction, though it was said that this was built probably over the course of 20 or 30 years. What you see are the magnificent Inca terraces here. The Inca were responsible for. They were masters of agriculture and engineering on a Bronze Age level. But as we go higher up, then we start to encounter other ways of construction which are far more difficult. And especially in this picture, you see these massive blocks of granite, some weighing 40 tons, some 60 tons, somehow made it up onto this mountain. Because the quarry we've been to is across the valley and up the side of a mountain. So somehow, minimum of 60-ton blocks were moved down the mountain, across the valley, across the river, and then up on top here, and they fit still with amazing precision. Especially as you can see here, again, where I am, you cannot get a human hair from the right side to the left side. That block is perfect, or almost perfect in terms of how it fits the ones underneath it. And what is likely is that this, again, was an example of what happened when there was a cataclysm in the past, destroying the beautiful megalithic ancient things. And then when the Inca arrived, they rebuilt around it. And this actually is Jesus Samara, the expert, in front of what is left of the intact part of the so-called Sun Temple. But on the right-hand side of this wall, you see this, which is Inca period reconstruction. And you can see that if the Inca were responsible for all of this work, they would have hit one next to the other. They wouldn't have filled it with rubble or fill like that. And I honestly believe this was the Inca's attempt in trying to rebuild something that technically is beyond their capability. And other evidence we have is this photograph was taken in the 1930s before there was And this, I believe, shows us also because the Spanish prohibited anyone visiting these sites when they arrived in Peru, because this was regarded as pagan, so it was out of bounds. So I believe we're looking at an Inca thing far more ancient. And this as well, I believe, is an example. I've shown this to engineers of how the stone was actually cut. It wasn't done with chisels, it wasn't done with lasers. Possibly, according to some engineers, the vibrational electronic stone was able to destabilize the stone with a very narrow path of energy. And what we do find is we do find perfect 90-degree angles, but in general, these ancient builders were not interested in the linear way that we approach construction. They were more interested in organic ways, which makes it a very difficult job actually for engineers because they don't understand why they would do the construction techniques they did. It looks far more difficult than to do it in a standard what we would call a Western technique. Another example of the stone action of bedrock using its unknown but you can cut down one side, cut down the other side, cut down the bottom, and how do you extract the stone? How do you get in behind it to cut it down? Is the question most engineers have, and archaeologists have a lot of knowledge to look at this sort of thing.
Our victory is near.
And just more examples. Across the valley from Ollantaytambo is this mountain. And if you look, you can see buildings clinging to the side, which are great achievements of the Inca civilization. We know because as we go up there, we can see their construction technique. But one of the anomalies we see here is this, which may be kind of difficult to see in the picture, but it is the profile of a human head, about 500 feet tall. A lot of people will say that it's natural, but as you get closer to it, I think, as a sculptor, somebody was responsible. Here we see the mouth, we see a fang or a tooth, and then the eye there. And it very much, once you see it, it's difficult to dismiss it as being a natural phenomenon. And Machu Picchu, of course, is the most famous ancient site in South America. Said to have been built by the Inca over the course of 30 years, about 600 years ago. But once you start to look at the stonework in Cusco and other places and visit Machu Picchu, you start to see the same situation. You see, obviously, the Inca did an incredible amount of work in this location, such as these amazing terraces. But you see, it's stone stacked upon stone. It's all local stone, which has been used. But this is a photograph from 1911 when it was discovered by Hiram Bingham. And already you can see the difference. Contrary to what some people say, Machu Picchu was not totally overgrown by plants, but it was high enough in an obscure enough area that it's difficult to see unless you're actually up there looking at it. But again, you see quite rough work here, but then this megalithic area, which is in the spiritual core of the city, so-called city of Machu Picchu. And that's a phenomenon we find not only here or in Peru, but in general. If you're looking for the oldest work, look for the core of the most ancient of sites, and that usually is where you'll find the oldest. From there, other work has been done on top of it and then expanding out. But in some places, there's so much work that has been done that it's difficult to see the actual oldest part of it. But this makes it kind of obvious. 1913, when they were digging Machu Picchu out, it revealed huge, beautifully constructed work such as this. And this is the famous Temple of Three Windows, right in the same tiny area. Now, the Intihuatana, which is called the Hitching Post of the Sun, is the iconic aspect of Machu Picchu. It's the center of the ancient part of Machu Picchu. And it's not simply a sculpted stone. It's in fact the top of the mountain. It's the exposed peak. Below it is a mountain of solid granite, white granite, with a very high quartz content. And what we find out as we explore Egypt and Peru and Bolivia is that the ancient megalithic builders didn't simply find big stones and use them. They went specifically for stone that was high in quartz and possibly iron. And because quartz has piezoelectric properties, it's possible that what these people were looking for and why they were constructing with it was because of the electrical or vibratory nature of the stone itself. And that's why they would go great distances to bring megalithic blocks into places in order to construct them. It had to have a certain quality in the material. Now, what the Intihuatana hitching post does do is that it is perfectly aligned to north, south, east, and west, but it also points, each one of those cardinal directions points to a mountain. And when we were there at one time, we brought a compass with us, and these two gentlemen repeated this process 10 times. They took the compass in close to it.
Pilots, your mission is to destroy the enemy's ground equipment and bases.
Attention to the map.
Now you're not allowed to be too close to the structure. They say but there appears here that maybe they don't want close examination. And a lot of people would like to be that way. There's totally rock areas, so you're not allowed to put in complete measurements.
Excuse me.
And I think this is an obvious example where you see three distinct little styles, all done.
Attention to the designated grid zone. Roger that. Attention to the map.
But I think
Roger that.
the oldest, the middle, and then the Inca. And this is simply another beautiful construction inside a cave on the backside of Machu Picchu that most people don't look at. But it is so beautiful, incredibly integrated. Again, borderless work. And as we travel out from the city of Cusco, actually heading back towards Titicaca, what you can see here is you see adobe construction predominantly, but underneath it is a megalithic foundation. And if the megalithic work was done structurally by the Inca, you would think they would produce a beautifully straight line where one material intersected the other. But it literally looks as though they found a ruin and built on top of it, which I think definitely is the case. Because even though in the Spanish Chronicles they would say that the Inca so-and-so built a structure, it could very well be interpreted as that he built at the structure, built on something. So this is a site called Silustani, which is near Lake Titicaca, and these are called Chulpa burial mounds because there's an opening, very small, on the eastern side. So the story is that when the sun would rise, it's related to rebirth.
Destroy the target.
Worshippers of the sun.
Somebody attack him.
Engineers there.
Affirmative.
Built. The internal material here is of a higher density than the external shell, and also the cupping you see in an intact one. The outer wall had these hollow pockets. When I went inside one of these with the engineer Christopher Dunn, he was able to figure out that the perfect harmonic of the interior of it was A sharp. So that's a very special
target.
The same can be seen at Machu Picchu. You find these megalithic buildings where the stones have been pulled apart, not by people trying to pry them apart, by some massive disturbance that actually pulled them from the space they were building. This is a cycle around the world. I just showed you that it's a spiritual mechanism.
Attention to the designated grid zone.
Somebody cover me.
Affirmative!
Attacking.
Launching an attack!
Somebody cover me.
Many people think ancient aliens were responsible. It's construction. The stone was found. Again, you take a metal ruler and you place it on
Reloading.
a lot of the surfaces. There's no movement, and you can't see light. If you take a flashlight, you can't see light in between. So a lot of these surfaces are within 2/10,000ths of an inch. It's flat as a glass table. It's not better. Now, the thing about Tumbacoco is that it was buried under mud, under a wall of mud that happened at some time in the distant past, and the majority of it is still buried. The Bolivian government has not gotten around to do much in terms of excavation there. But again, 10,000 years ago, the water of